as well if you want to grab a beverage and maybe have some conversations with those who choose to stay. I thought we had invited all 6 candidates here this evening. You might notice one vacancy at the table. I think we're going to be great with 5 though. So big thanks to all the 5 who have shown up here this evening. When the time comes for questions from the floor, please note we have 2 mics set up on either aisle there. We have one, do we have a wireless microphone as well? No? Okay. We just have the 2 microphones there. We will also be assisted by some volunteers this evening as well. Corey is sitting, I believe she was sitting, oh, there she is right there, and she's got a bucket. So if you prefer, instead of going to the microphone to have a written question, you can certainly write those down. Just wave your piece of paper high in the air. Corey will see that when the time comes and collect those, and I'll try to intersperse those amongst the questions from the floor. Please just line up a single file behind the appropriate microphone, and we will get to your question hopefully before the event wraps up. As well, we had some questions submitted through the Banff Lake Louise Hospitality Association and the Rocky Mountain Outlook. I have a few of those in this bucket as well to draw from when needed. Melanie Breon with the Hospitality Association is our official timekeeper tonight. She's going to let all the candidates know and everyone else when we're sort of at the 30-second mark and when we need to wrap up those questions. So we're going to be starting the evening by inviting our 6 candidates to provide some opening comments about why they want to be MLA for Banff Kananaskis. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to let the audience know who they are, what specific leadership skills they bring to the table, what their top priorities would be, and anything else they want to say. And we will do those when we get to those here shortly in reverse alphabetical order. Then we have a total of 5 predetermined questions. Each candidate will have precisely 90 seconds to respond to each question. Then we will go to questions from the floor, 90-second responses. Now, when we get to those questions, I would ask you to please also direct those questions through me. You can direct the who you'd like to respond to up to 2 specific candidates. If you don't direct it to anyone in particular, I might choose 2 candidates. I'm going to try my best to give everyone equal time on stage here this evening to say what they have to say, but they will also have 90 seconds to respond to those as well. And then the closing remarks, each candidate will have up to 2 minutes to provide a wrap-up statement, and we'll do those in alphabetical order. So our agenda tonight should have about, I guess, 9 minutes or so for the candidate introductions, 45 minutes for structured questions, another 45 to 55 for questions from the floor, and then about 9 minutes for closing statements, or sorry, 10 minutes, I should say, for closing statements. And that should take us to about 9 o'clock here this evening. Okay, so is everyone ready to go? We are going to start with 2 minutes on the clock, and we're going to start in reverse alphabetical order for introductions. So I would like to invite Cam Westhead to say his piece first.
Thank you very much, Rob. I want to thank the Banff Lake Louise Hospitality Association and all the sponsors, and all of you for being here tonight too. I got involved in politics 4 years ago to put my skills as a registered nurse to work for you. My approach is always to listen and learn from you first, and then work with you to achieve your goals. I attend your meetings, I attend your events, because I care about your community. Together, we've come a long way. $25 a day childcare, a new elementary school, affordable housing, Rome Transit, the Calgary Cancer Centre, the list goes on. There's more work to do, and that's why I'm seeking re-election. When Rachel Notley and I took office in 2015, Alberta was in the midst of the most dramatic oil price collapse in a generation. Another boom had turned to bust, and we were faced with a choice. Previous governments responded to economic busts in a predictable way. They made things worse, and every day Albertans paid the price. Rachel Notley and I set out on a different path. We put everyday Albertans first. We chose to build schools for our kids, not give golf club memberships to political insiders. We didn't just talk about economic diversification, we did something about it. Like supporting tourism communities, your community, with investments in things like affordable housing, transit, and the Banff YWCA. These are the priorities you told me matter the most. We didn't just get angry about pipelines, we fought for them and continue to fight for them with a strategic plan to bring others on board. And every step of the way, while the UCP called for deep cuts, We defended our public services while keeping Alberta's budget on track to balance by 2023. Over the last 4 years, we've gotten to know each other better, and we've made great strides together. I'm asking for your vote because I'm not done fighting for you.
Check.
Thank you, Cam Westhead. I'd now like to invite Brenda Stanton to take the microphone.
Thanks, Rob. Good evening, and I'm not going to lie, it's nice to be home this week for the last of our forums. Not that Cam's hometown of Bright Creek didn't do a great job on Friday night. Like Cam, thank you to the Hospitality Association for hosting us this evening. Thank you, Rob, for moderating. Thank you to my fellow candidates, and of course to all of you. I'm Brenda Stanton, your Alberta Party candidate, and I've been blessed to call the Bow Valley home for over 30 years. I've lived in Seavey, Banff, Canmore. I've lived in staff accommodation with countless roommates. I've lived the life that most of us here in the Bow Valley have. I've worked in the hospitality and tourism industry my entire adult life, from housekeeper to general manager to starting my own consulting business. Then I returned to school to get my master's degree in tourism management. Tourism and hospitality in these mountains are part of my DNA. Cam is absolutely right. He has done well in ensuring that the Bow Valley has gotten their fair share of the money from the NDP. As he said, the $25 a day daycare, investments in Rome, the list goes on. But all of us know, and in particular those of us in business know, that you can't be sustainable unless you have proper policies and frameworks in place. So while the Bow Valley received funds for affordable housing, there's been changes made to the Condominium Act, which will be coming up shortly. Those changes will make it more expensive for the owners. And we know that most of our housing here in the rental housing here in the Bow Valley is condominiums. As I reviewed the income thresholds for rent subsidies, I realized that they make no sense for Canmore or Banff. They're far too low. So again, yes, the money's been great, but they haven't made the framework to make sure that we stay prosperous here in the Bow Valley. As we know, labor's always been an issue. Not just here, but pretty much in any tourism industry. Already, Mel? Are you sure that's 2 minutes? At any rate, we of course invited the NDP government to assist us in getting access to foreign labor, an invitation that they then declined.
All right, thank you, Brenda.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Miranda Rosin.
This election is about change. It's about the future of our province and what direction we want to go. 4 years ago, the provincial election was also about change. Albertans were fed up with entitlement, they were fed up with the arrogance, and they wanted something fresh. And we got it, and we gave the NDP a fair chance. They had good intentions. But 4 years later, Alberta is not the thriving province that we once were. After these last 4 years, there are 170,000+ Albertans out of work, and 12,000 more who have given up entirely looking. Our youth unemployment is at its highest rate in Albertan history. Our two major cities, Calgary and Edmonton, have the first and third highest unemployment rates in Canada. New home sales are at their lowest point in 20 years. And we were the only provincial economy in Canada that actually shrunk over the last 4 years. So this election is about change. It's about enacting sound fiscal and economic policy that's based on common sense and proven tactics, not government ideology. It's about ensuring that we have an Alberta for today and all of our tomorrows, and all of our kids' tomorrows and all of their kids' tomorrows. This election is about making sure that Alberta is a wonderful place to live, raise a family, and work. Now, I understand that making Alberta a vibrant province again, we have to balance the economy and our environment, especially in places like the Bow Valley, Canmore, and Banff, where our local economies are so heavily reliant on the beautiful sceneries that we get to call home. So that's why I'm very proud and excited to say that United Conservatives have released a very comprehensive platform. In fact, it's actually the most comprehensive platform ever released by a political party in Albertan history to combat these changes. We are committed to reigniting our economy, getting people back to work in the private sector, and balancing our budget within one term without devastating cuts, but by actually growing our economy. Our plan involves environmental conservation, investing in our tourism industry, our film and our arts industries, and also helping our small business owners, which we have so many of in this Bow Valley. So my name is Miranda Rosin, and I hope you will join me tonight and on Election Day in bringing change to Alberta and putting in the United Conservatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Miranda. Please welcome Dave Phillips.
Yeah, hello, people. There's time on this. Hello? You're good. Yeah, 10-4. Okay, I got a lot of ground to cover. I always say I don't work by the hour because I get so much done in 15 minutes. But unfortunately, we only get like 2 minutes. I did it once in Medicine Hat. They gave us a whole 3 minutes to say our bit. But I got time to teach you a little bit of a trick I learned. But I didn't invent this, but it's pretty good. You take a piece of paper, fold it like an accordion, fold it again like that. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, mornings, afternoons, Sundays off. Anyway, first of all, the ND, I don't like to attack anybody, but the NDP is like fiscal irresponsible, and they proved it. She's spending like billions and billions of more dollars that she wants to spend. I did the same thing like 30 years ago in business. One time I ordered up a Bobcat like pizza for $68,000, but we bought $3 billion worth of boxcars, anyway, like I know a lot about business because I've been in business all my entire life. And I worked at Fortress Mountain. But anyway, I'm just going to say what I got here until they cut me off. But anyway, I'm going to build a train to Banff. The paperwork's already been done. And then I want no dam in Springbank. And in the newspaper it says I wanted a dam in Springbank, but there's plans to build it up in McLean Creek, and it could be a fishing hole, because what they're going to do is they're going to build a pond in Springbank, and then they're probably going to develop houses around it like every other thing. And then I'm going to get some land for the natives, even if I have to break some leases with, because there's ranchers that own like 15 sections, or they've got like leases on everything. They got more land than the Indians do, and I'll take it away and I'll give it to Morley, and I'll try to find some land for Tatina, because when you look on the map, they barely have anything, and they need help from, like, we need like treatment centers on the reserve. We need like we could set up like 1,000 teepees and bring them home and because there's a lot of people on the skids downtown, and they're cowboys and Indians that are on the skids. And the drop-in center executives get paid $350,000, and that's not charity. And I don't know how many of them there is, but that's millions of dollars. But I think they're getting $110 per person per night at the shelter.
All right, thank you very much, Dave.
I'll shut their funding off.
Dave
I'll
Phillips.
give it to the people, and that will be enough to kickstart this economy.
Dave
When
Phillips,
Ralph
thank you
Klein
very
gave
much.
us $400. My firewood business was
Dave,
kicking ass. Thank you.
that's quite enough. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Anita Crowshoe.
Oki Nixokwax. I want to thank you for holding this forum. I want to thank the people that have filled the room to listen and to ask important questions that are from your head and from your heart. I come to your territory as a guest, as a member of an Indigenous community who has served in Calgary for the Calgary Stampede, who has worked at Hit Smashed In Buffalo Jump and provided world historic conversations while running 4 different tours at once, with 2 of them being English as a second language. I have worked in order to look at relationships and allow us to be on equal ground. One of the most important things that I learned was when I sat down with my dear friend George Brookman. I told him I was going to run, and he said, "Who are you running with?" And I said, "Nobody ever tells who they're running with. They just join the race." And then he said to me, "Well, murdered and missing women. You know, I think about this a lot. I donate a lot of money. Rotary Club donates money. We do things for them at Christmas time." And he said, "Wouldn't you agree that that's a concern, that's a social concern?" I said, "No. And I don't agree, because then I would admit to the fact that I'm a murdered and missing woman, and I would admit to the fact that my parents were on leadership. They worked hard, and they worked hard to create strong, kind people to go out and work together. And I want to build a better relationship between all of us. I want to role model an example to the people within my nation, beyond my nation, and I want to look at great opportunities for all." Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. We will now move on to our predetermined questions. The first question will be on the subject of affordable housing, and we will start with Miranda, then go on to Dave, Anita, Brenda, and Cam. So here's the question. Many Bow Valley residents who live and work here struggle with a very high cost of living, the greatest cost of which is housing. Some great progress has been made locally in the last 4 years in terms of affordable housing investment and advocacy, but more work still needs to be done. What specifically will you do to address one of the most challenging issues we have, which is availability and access to affordable housing? Miranda Rosin.
Well, I know this hits home for me. I mean, I am a young person who lives in the Bow Valley, and I can tell you it is very tough to make ends meet sometimes when you're living in these jurisdictions that have such a high cost of living. But one of the biggest things facing people, whether it's in the Bow Valley, whether it's outside of the Bow Valley right now, is just being able to get into a home of any type, and that's because the CMHC has put in this new stress test. And this stress test was put in for hot markets like Vancouver and Toronto that are just erupting. But the stress test really disproportionately affects communities like ours and provinces like Alberta. And so one of the big commitments of the United Conservatives is to work with other jurisdictions to try and get Alberta exempt from this stress test, because one of the biggest barriers to getting a new home is being able to qualify for that first mortgage. And right now, a lot of people who are making a six-figure salary, which honestly is quite a good salary, can barely qualify for a $300,000 mortgage, which doesn't even buy you an apartment out here. So one of the biggest things we want to work with is working with the federal government and other jurisdictions to get Alberta exempt from that stress test so that people who are working 40 plus hours a week can at least qualify for a mortgage that can get them a new home.
Thank you, Miranda. Next up to answer the question on availability and access to affordable housing is Dave Phillips.
Yeah, okay, I'm back. Okay, I worked at Fortress Mountain in '88 during the Olympics, and I really enjoyed that job, and if I could do it all over again, I would have stayed at the mountain, but they want to develop Fortress Mountain, so we're going to actually build them a bridge to do that, because it's always the little bridge at the bottom of the hill that they can't get fixed. And the paperwork for the train's already in place, but anyway, like that always was an issue, was like accommodation for people that work in Banff. And my idea is a skyscraper that people can live in, and then they got to prove that they're working in Banff so that people don't just move in here. But anyway, that might go. Well, we could try to make it look as good as we can. But I mean, like if you guys want to solve the problem, let's put up some buildings. Let's solve the problem. And yeah, the house prices actually. I looked at the realty. There's a lot of realty going on here, but I think the prices are actually fairly reasonable considering the privilege of living in Banff, and all things considered. And like I live in Sundre out in the bush on the Crown land. One day they're going to come and knock down my neighborhood with the Faller Buncher, or they're already like we got to stop clear-cut logging a bit, and we also have to stop fracking immediately because it's going to ruin the water, and the water's worth more than the oil. And if you don't know it, we're only making $12 a barrel on our oil, so not even said herself that they ain't making any money. I'm in the firewood business. We don't even turn a wheel anymore because if we only make like minus $3 a load, we can't afford to work, right? But I see opportunities in Banff. Like if I want to win the election, but if I don't, I'm going to become a Cadillac taxi in Banff.
All right, thank you very much, Dave Phillips.
Cigarettes. Plus, I can even sell these coats. I can get them wholesale. But anyway, there's lots.
Thanks, Dave.
And the businesses in Canmore and stuff.
All right, on the question of availability and access to affordable housing, Anita Crowshoe.
Coming from an Indigenous community and working down in Pine Ridge, South Dakota, where they have the highest HIV rate for the youth, housing was not an issue, even though it was third world housing that they were living in the community. I came back home and I was very fortunate to acknowledge the place where I lived. And I think, too, people that live in this area, when you go and explore and you see things, you feel very fortunate when you step back into your doors, into your home. Affordable housing, I think when we look at the economic structure, it's not working. But I can tell you this, when we come together for our ceremonies, we set up our teepees, and we make a home there, and we make a community, we all work together in that. And when we look at that, one of the interesting things I learned was from Mrs. Barclay when I did a study, and I went up to look at the hostels, and in Brad Creek, and the urban hostel they created in Calgary area, I learned something about community. And I feel as though we need to go beyond the numbers, we need to go beyond the four walls to create affordable housing components and look at zone opportunities to collaborate and work together beyond cultures.
Thank you, Anita. Brenda Stanton.
Thank you, Rob. So affordable housing has definitely been in my wheelhouse for many years. One of the things that I have suggested, we know that the Bow Valley has been trying to get resort status for 20 plus years. So a policy that I've presented to the Alberta Party is to create actual tourism districts. And for this area in particular, what I would try to work with our two towns with is to create a tourist district where we eliminate the current TIF, the current DMF in Canmore. We charge 5% in both towns, 2% of which go to our municipal governments for infrastructure, 2% for marketing, and we actually create a valley-wide housing fund of that extra 1%. So instead of Banff trying to create affordable housing and Canmore trying to create affordable housing, we actually start looking at a housing collective. I got to go to a meeting in Calgary with the community housing, affordable housing collective. And what they look at is the whole continuum of housing, from shelter straight through to market. So I think that's the route that I would very much like to work with stakeholders on.
And finally, on the question of affordable housing, Cam Westhead.
Thanks, Rob. I think that everybody deserves a safe, affordable place to call home. And one of the things that I've heard the most frequently from both employers and residents alike is that access to labor and the cost of living is a barrier to having a strong business here in Banff and in the Bow Valley. Like Rob said, there's been a lot of progress in the last 4 years. Our government has worked with the town of Banff and Parks Canada to build the T-New housing complex. It's a 131-unit building. We've also announced funding to support the YWCA in their construction as well. This is a thing we do by creating partnerships between governments. It's not something we can advance by picking fights with the federal government. We need to work with them as partners because this is something that we all do together. I can tell you what won't help build affordable housing is blowing a $4.5 billion hole in our revenue stream like the UCP wants to do by giving big tax cuts to corporations and banks. So what we've done is created Alberta's first affordable housing strategy, and we've backed that up with a $1.2 billion capital plan. And so that's gone into projects like T-New and the YWCA, but also in Canmore with seniors housing. Currently, there's no dementia care available in the Bow Valley at all. And so this summer, we expect construction to begin on 60 new units for dementia care because seniors deserve an affordable place and a safe place to stay in their neighborhood with their friends and family and their support systems.
Thank you. Our second question will be on the environment. For this one, we will start with Brenda, then go to Cam, then Dave, then Anita, and then Miranda. So the question is, what do you believe is the most important environmental issue or issues facing Banff National Park? And what do you see as the provincial government's role in addressing that issue or issues? Brenda.
So I'm going to put on the tourism hat. I truly think that one of our most pressing environmental issues is where we're hitting as far as our carrying capacity of visitors. So I think it makes far more sense for the government to invest in tourism destinations outside of our national parks and our mountains here so that we can actually get folks moving outwards. With Alberta still getting that revenue, still keeping people here. And I think once we start moving people around in this province, again, we still get the economic boom, but we don't have the stresses that we're facing here.
Next up, Cam.
Thanks, Rob. I think that climate change is the biggest issue facing the Bow Valley. Climate change isn't just the biggest issue facing the Bow Valley. I think it's the biggest issue facing our planet. And we've seen increased severity and frequency of natural disasters. Everybody remembers practically every past summer. For the few summers, it's hard to see the mountains because of the smoke here. And so we are at risk from wildfire. We're at risk from flood and drought. And so climate change makes those things more severe and more frequent. And so we need to make sure we're taking action. We can see it here with the glaciers receding. Everybody that's been up Highway 93, you see those markers. It's accelerating, and we need to do something about it. So our government has undertaken the most ambitious climate change plan in North America. We've put an economy-wide price on carbon. We have an energy efficiency program that gives rebates back to homeowners to save money on their energy bills. And we've also created incentives for the oil industry in terms of carbon competitiveness, investing in clean tech that they can also monetize, and make sure that we continue to position Alberta as a global leader in the most environmentally responsible energy producer in the world.
On the question of environmental issues, Dave Phillips.
Okay, we're going to do this like a rodeo faster we can get on now. Okay, the thing is, the NDP are actually wanting to take land from the O'Chief's Reserve up north. Like I'm about Alberta. This is a map of the world, but it doesn't have any countries on it. And I was given that by, I'm going to drop a name, it's Charles Nabors, Nabors. His dad was the biggest oil guy in the world. He's more famous than Kiss. And I've known him for 20 years, and he helps me out. Anyway, and so the UCP, like they want a $30 fee to use the parks. Like I don't know if it's going to be in Banff, but I'm like out in Sunday, but I'm a stone's throw away from Banff where I'm at. But they want a $30 fee for like people with campers. I'd even go with free camping, free firewood, like we used to have it. Like I want anything like this carbon tax doesn't make any sense. Why are we paying? And actually, one thing I learned was they built this thing called a carbon catcher on a coal plant, and it can actually eliminate the carcinogens or whatever by like 75%. So you can actually burn super clean coal. But the government's literally strangling us, because that's why I'm doing this, because Trudeau wants to give our country to the United Nations. It's called Agenda 21. I can't even sleep at night with what the UN wants to do with the world. That's why I'm here. Like I ran in Medicine Hat one time. I ran in Saskatchewan to be the mayor. I got arrested, but 7 votes and arrested. But anyway, and then I paid my dues. I ran in Calgary. I got 25 votes against Prentice, but that's probably the 25 people I got nominated by. And then I ran again in Medicine Hat because they were jumping ship 10 at a time, the progressives and the wild. And this Jason Kenney, he gets them all going, then he says something stupid like,
all right,
if,
Dave,
if an
thank
oil
you so
company
much.
signs on now, there'll be no more
Dave,
royalties. It'll be the same as if you
you
sign on
very
today.
much.
So there'll be no royalties. It's bullshit.
Anita Crowshoe on the question of the environment.
Let's just take a deep breath here. Lake Louise. My grandparents, they go up every year. My grandfather, the late Julius English, was a farmer. And he got to send his harvest all the way down to the States and compete with the big ones down there. And we won a couple. And I'm so proud of the family and the Piikani Nation. But I went up there. I went up there after the last forum, and I needed a break. So I went in the middle of Lake Louise, and I took some tobacco, and I talked to the environment, and I put it in the ground. See, what I was taught was epigenetics, biogenetics. We silo components and pieces. That's included within the First Nations governance process, that even our own people are forgetting today. And when those are included, it's like a cell formation. The good cells are talking to the bad cells, but they're all connected together in order to move forward. What we want to do is we want to reinitiate those components. We want to be able to revive the communities, and we want to be able to work together to make an environment not just for humans, but for the water and for everybody else. And I think we can do that.
Finally, on the question of environmental issues, Miranda Rosin.
I think the biggest issue facing the environment out here is how we balance our industry and our tourism industry with the environment, because we are so blessed to live in this incredible place. I did a test today, and if you Google just Canada or Canadian landscapes, 4 of the 6 pictures that come up are either of Banff, Lake Louise, or Moraine Lake. And that's because people who don't live in Canada, when they think of Canada, they think of here. And they're jealous. They wish they could live here like we do. And they deserve the opportunity to see this beautiful place that we call home. But we need to make sure that we can do that in a sustainable way. So that's why the United Conservatives are committed to doubling our tourism spending across Alberta from tourists by 2030. But we also have a very comprehensive plan to balance that with the environment. We're committed to investing money in nonprofit park societies, so protection societies. We're committed to investing in more park officers to protect our trails and to maintain our trails and create new trails. We are committed to tripling the funding in the Riparian Habitat Society and Protection Society, because we want to make sure that all of our lands are protected while people can still come and enjoy them. And so that's what I think is the biggest issue facing us, because we are so blessed to live here. But I do think the rest of the world also deserves to see, the beauty that we get to call home. We should find the right way to balance that.
Thanks, everybody. We're going to move on to question 3, something that Miranda just alluded to, which is sustainable tourism. So for this one, we're going to start with Dave, then we'll go to Miranda, Cam, Brenda, and finish up with Anita. So here's the question. The livelihood of residents and businesses within Banff National Park depends on a sustainable tourism industry. What do you see as the single biggest challenge to ensuring the future sustainability of this sector? And what would be your strategy to champion that issue to or within government if you're elected? Dave Phillips.
Okay, I always said that, like, if you want a job, go to Banff, or, go to resorts. But anyway, I want to just say that my website's called davephillips.world. I built it for $2.62, so I'm going to get some good deals for the government too. But davephillips.world, because I can't say what I need to say. I got a new phone because my phone's going to be cut off. I got, my insurance on my car is due. I spent my lunch money on this idea. I've spent thousands of dollars, and I tried to actually get like 86 people on board to make like a new party, the consortium. But anyway, I do need help, and I'm running on Indian gas. Thank God for the natives people in Morley that fill me up and keep me going. And I guess I've got big ideas, and one good thing about an independent is I can put a lot of deals on the table, but I can't do nothing with Jason Kenney at the helm, or if the NDP and the UCP get in, it's going to be the end of you know what I mean? Like if 4 more years of this kind of management. But I can work my government with a group of people, any group of people, and I want to run it like a business meeting. Like, I want to save the wild horses. Second, the motion carried, boom. And then, one thing I want to do is, there's about 15 horses out where I'm at, but the government's taking them away and they're putting them on birth control. But anyway, and then one day I was thinking I was having a hard time. I was thinking about the horses, but I kept thinking about a TV station with Dukes of Hazzard, Little House on the Prairie. Then I looked up, I saw an antique TV station thing with the old school TV antenna, so I think God wants to be able to communicate with us, because the TV right now sucks, but we only had 3 channels when I grew up, but this would be like a free TV station. But I got everybody should be able to sell marijuana, not just 10 people, you know what I'm saying? And I got...
All right, Dave Phillips, everybody, thank you. On the question of sustainable tourism, Miranda Rosin.
Okay, so like I said, the United Conservatives definitely believe that tourism is such a vibrant industry in Alberta. Something we may not know is tourism across Alberta actually contributes 5% of our GDP, which may not sound like a lot, but oil and gas right now is only 16%. So in comparison, tourism is such a strong economic driver out here. So one of the first things we're committed to doing is putting tourism under the responsibility of the Ministry of Economic Development and Trade, because we do believe that tourism is not a niche issue, it's an Alberta issue, and we want to treat it as the strong economic driver that it is and that it deserves to be. But when it comes to sustainable tourism, one of the biggest things that people enjoy when they come to our parks are being able to use the wilderness. And I know there's OHV users, there's mountain bike users, there's hikers, and everybody wants a piece of the pie, and we want to make sure that we can do that in a sustainable way. So something that we are committed to doing is to putting in a $30 OHV trail permit fee. And like I sort of alluded to in my last comment, that fee will go towards putting more park officers on the trails to sustain them and work on them. We'll be putting more maintenance on the trails. We want to make sure that all of our trails are upkept and that everybody can use them while not overusing our environment. Another industry we're committed to working with is the film industry. Our film industry is so vibrant out here, and it brings in a lot of tourism dollars as well. And that's actually a very clean industry. It doesn't leave much of an environmental footprint. So that's another big piece of our platform, is we're willing to work with the film industry as well.
On the question of sustainable tourism, Cam Westhead.
I think that tourism is absolutely essential to our economic diversification in our province, and that's a key goal of our government. The thing that I hear about most in terms of sustainability is the affordability in the Bow Valley. And like I said earlier, something that I hear from both residents and business owners alike is the difficulty of attracting and retaining labor. We welcome the world to Banff and to the Bow Valley, and we want to make sure that when they come here, they have a great visitor experience. And so some of the ways we need to do that is to have the social services that underpin all of the businesses, whether you're directly related to tourism or supporting tourism. And so the way we've done that is by addressing affordability in the Bow Valley. So one of our key commitments is to have a universal $25 a day childcare program. So right now we've got a pilot project in Banff and Canmore, and it's been so successful that all of the parents want to participate. And so expanding that to a universal program helps parents get back to work, and it helps employers as well. Also, we've talked about housing and having investment in housing, and making sure that we continue investing in those kind of social support networks. We've lowered school fees, so making affordability in Banff and Bow Valley is a way that we can have the economic sustainability for the tourism industry.
On the question of sustainable tourism, Brenda Stanton.
Thanks, Rob. So again, if we look at the three pillars of sustainability, our social, our economy, and our environment, I do agree with Cam that really what is lacking here is on the social side. And I think a big part of that is, again, access to labor that will make this place home. As soon as we start getting labor that love this place as much as all of us that live here do, they start taking care of the environment far more than when we're just picking up transient employees. Again, then we also need the housing for them. So once we have good, solid housing, we have a strong labor force, I firmly believe that they will, like we all do, take care of our environment. They will share the story of our environment. They will be our ambassadors and our advocates. So I believe it has to absolutely start with the social side as well, with investments in housing, and I've already gone into how I have proposed to the Alberta Party the policies to put in place for that. Thank you.
And finally, on the question of sustainable tourism, Anita Crowshoe.
You have this beautiful powwow. You hear about Walking Buffalo, you hear about the stories there, you hear about these big parades down at the Calgary Stampede. And I remember this one time my dad said to me, my grandpa told me a story, and I said, what's that? He said, the first time people ever saw a powwow. And he said, the drummers were just drumming, and you would hear, pow. And as the people were watching, they were saying, wow. And he said, and that's how powwow was formed. So let's make a wow component of things. I worked at the Stampede for many years. I was third generation, early time. We create a big thing that's bigger than the city of Calgary for the 10 days. There's opportunities to be able to look at those. But not only that, your relatives and your neighbors within those nations are big competitors in there that make the amazing show go wow. We need to connect all those pieces so that we can create a stronger powwow in Banff.
Our next question is on the subject of community inclusivity. We're going to start with Cam, then go to Brenda, then Anita, then Dave, and wrap up with Miranda. So here's the question. Banff is a hotspot for immigration, with more than 1 in 5 long-term Bow Valley residents having been born outside of Canada. Many of these long-term locals are highly engaged in their community, but do not yet have citizenship and therefore cannot vote in Canada. How are you prepared to ensure their voices are heard? Cam.
I think that's a great question. And I think that when we think about our community and diversity, temporary foreign workers are part of the fabric who make up our community. And that diversity makes us stronger. So the way that I'd like to see those folks engaged is through grassroots activism. Some of the things we've done to help promote diversity within our classrooms is by updating Alberta's school curriculum. And so school children can learn about racism, they can learn about different cultures, Indigenous heritage and Indigenous history. And so that way we can, from the early years in education, students can learn about how important it is to embrace different cultures and to learn about different cultures. We've also created a Filipino curriculum, or we're developing a Filipino curriculum. And the way I've tried to promote diversity myself and hear those voices is by going to as many events as I possibly can. That's one of the things that I've enjoyed most about this job, is getting out to events, getting to meet people, and being accessible. I think that showing up and telling people that you're interested by appearing at their events when you get invited, and having an open door policy so that people feel comfortable coming to the office and having those conversations and getting to know their MLA as a friend and an advocate rather than someone who they only go to when they have problems. So I think democracy works better the more we talk to each other, and that's what I hope to continue.
Next on the subject of community inclusivity, Brenda Stanton.
Thanks, Rob. I'm delighted that I've actually been a member of the Bow Valley Immigration Partnership for the last few years and was one of the authors of the Bow Valley Inclusion Charter for our employers, of which in Banff the majority have signed off. So yay! I think Banff has always done an outstanding job at creating an inclusive community. Now, when it comes to including folks in our political spectrum, that has been a stumbling block. And certainly as I've been knocking on the door with people and people have gone, sorry, I can't vote, I only have my PR. I go, did you know that you can become a member of a political party? And they go, no, nobody's ever told me that. I said, you absolutely can. That is how you get engaged. You can become a member, you can vote on our policies. You have every right to have say in our policies. You can vote on the candidate, you can vote on the party leader. That's how you can get started. That's how you can start being part of your community. There was a public hearing here in Banff a few months ago that I reached out to the Filipino community, and I sat down with them and I said, you realize that even though you don't get to vote, you still have a say in this community. And they said, do we really? I said, absolutely. And within about 48 hours, I think they had 75 signatures on a letter to the town of Banff on a subject that was coming up at a public hearing. So I've tried very hard to make sure that that our travelers and our non-Canadian residents feel like they're part of the community.
On the subject of community inclusivity, Anita Crowshoe.
Immigration. When we looked at that, there was the settler relationship with the First Nations people when they first came into the area. And we didn't give you a piece of paper and tell you to sign it. And we did was we allowed you the opportunities to grow and prosper. And I think at the same time, the First Nations communities need time to catch up, to be able to grow and prosper just like the rest of us. And when we look at that, I'm going to go to one example of inclusivity. Head smashed in Buffalo Jump. There was a powwow. My auntie, the late Louise, ran the powwow, and the community members got together. We had a tornado come through. When you come to a place and it's traumatizing and it re-triggers your traumas, you can run, you can hide in the building, or you can stand like my grandfather said. Get your hammers, get your pickets, hammer down those teepees, stretch out those teepee poles, check your space, bring the firewood in, let's put some tea on and tell some stories, and double check our neighbors' places. And I think that's what we need to start doing, is we need to start looking at that as an approach and as an opportunity for us.
On the question of community inclusivity, Dave Phillips.
Okay, hello. Yeah, I got big ideas. Like the UCP guy, he wants to bring in like 50,000 immigrants and put them in the small rural areas. But the way it is the Chinese came, and nothing against anybody, but they bought the businesses, all like the GTIs, the grocery store, everything that they could get. And then the Punjabis buy the liquor stores. I'm not against anybody, but they hire their people. So it's actually, I'm almost a minority. But anyway, but what I want to have is like massive New York-style immigration, because we have to allow the rest of the world some space, and we've got lots of land, but I'm talking like building rails. And if we had like small settlements, that would create more businesses. And like I got one thing I'd just like to try to get this across is there's a paper I found it when I was running in an election. It's called the Alberta Gazette. I call it the smoking gun, but anyway, that's a paper that comes out every 2 weeks, and they give you like the foreclosures, so you get deals on houses, anything we're selling, like airplanes, which we should have kept, anything like that, immigrants and incorporators. But I want to put advertising in the back of that deal, and I want to get it delivered like a paper with kids and adults, so that I can create some, plus that advertising, because it's hard. In the old days, I just had to put an ad in the newspaper when I was in business, but with the internet and all this technology, nobody even wants to answer their damn phone. And everybody wants to use email. Like, I'm not on Facebook because I don't want to be on Facebook, and I don't have time to check my tweets and tweet. But I'm building a website, davephillips.world, and it's under construction. There's spelling errors galore, and I'm trying to get video on there. But there is video at Robin Hood Phillips, ROBON Phillips, R-O-B-O-N Phillips. On
All right, thank you, Dave.
Just listen, on YouTube, if you
thank
look
you,
up
Dave
Robin
Phillips.
Hood, damn it. If you look up Robin Hood Phillips on YouTube, there's my
Ladies and gentlemen,
there's my
please
campaign
welcome
from
Miranda
Medicine
Rosin
Hat.
on the subject of community inclusivity.
Well, I mean, so yeah, especially out here, inclusivity is such an important part of our Bow Valley. We do have many people who cannot vote in this process, but who do live out here. And in my nomination, I mean, obviously to win the candidacy, we had to have our own separate campaign. And I actually did knock on a ton of doors, almost all of them in Canmore, and I sold over 1,000 party memberships. And many of the people who bought memberships from me and who did vote for me to become the candidate were permanent residents and were people who typically could not be engaged in the electoral process. Because I do think it is so important that if you live somewhere, you still can have a voice. But outside of the official, formal voting process, I have actually worked quite hard to engage the young adult community in the Bow Valley as well, because they can oftentimes be a very disengaged crowd. So back when I was on the Canmore Young Adult Network board as their vice president of events, I actually helped to co-found a few events that I think were really important for getting young adult voices involved. Not only those who could vote, but also those who just lived here. So I did help to co-found the Move Mountains Festival, which was a festival/forum we held for the municipal election 2 years ago. And I've also helped to found events like Wings with Westhead and Beers with Boromin, who's the mayor of Canmore, to make sure that young adults felt comfortable having a voice with their elected representatives and that it wasn't some scary interaction going into an office. So I've made a really hard effort to make sure that young adults, minorities, permanent residents, anybody who really needs a voice but can't always have one can have a part in our democratic process.
Our final structured question will be on the subject of labor shortages. We're going to start with this one with Anita, then move on to Brenda, Miranda, Cam, and wrap things up with Dave. The largest occupational demand for hospitality employees in the Bow Valley is for positions like housekeepers, guest service agents, restaurant front of house staff, and kitchen helpers. Employers often rely on foreign workers to fill these roles. However, limitations on work permit duration and eligibility for existing past permanent residency cause many positions to remain unfilled. If elected MLA, are you prepared to support the implementation of a provincial immigrant nominee system, nominee stream, I should say, targeted to retain workers in those types of jobs in the hospitality industry? Anita.
You're trying to silo me. I would say inclusivity, that's important. And when we look at the oath and rights and freedoms with regards to our party, no cost, anybody should be feeling less than others. But I also think that silo needs to be opened up a little bit more, because those gap components, the fastest growing population is Natitipi, which is the Indigenous population. Lots of youth, and they work down at the Stampede. They go back to their communities. Let's not allow them to go to Stampede for 10 days. Let's bring them back to the places where there's amazing environments and there's good structure and they're able to work with other people, and we can set up mentorship programs to be able to support them, as well as the immigrant population as well. We need to fill that, and it's not about waiting for this bill, this piece to pass. It's about bringing the people in and creating those relationships so that you can get the work you need, so that that person comes in and wants a comfortable bed, it's made with clean sheets, stretched out, and you can flip a dime on it.
On the question of labor shortages, Brenda.
Short answer, yes. I've, of course, been working on labor shortages for the last however many years. And yes, we have absolutely engaged the Indigenous. We set up the Indigenous Workforce Task Force here in Banff, where we've been training and recruiting the Indigenous. With that, we're still short about 300 employees in Banff as permanent employees. Yes, we do need foreign labor and access to it, and more so through our LMIA program, which of course we did try to obtain a microeconomic status here for the Bow Valley so that we would be able to seek LMIA approvals, even though our unemployment rate was 6%, actually just over 6%. And unfortunately, we kind of hit a brick wall with the current government to sign off on that so that we could take it to the federal government. So absolutely, I would 100% be for that. But the next step to that is creating a plan, because we also recognize as we get into senior care, we're going to have shortages of folks in that as we seek to employ far more educational assistants. So I think we need to look at a fulsome plan for labor, starting with hospitality.
On the question of labor shortages, Miranda.
Well, I'm sure most of you know that the leader of the United Conservatives, Mr. Jason Kenney, did used to be the federal immigration minister. And actually, when Jason was the immigration minister for Canada, he welcomed more newcomers to Canada than any immigration minister in our entire history did. So we absolutely value the need for newcomers and for immigrants to our country to fill labor shortages and to make a meaningful difference in our country. And that's why we've actually committed to putting in a rural immigration strategy into our plan. We are committed to making sure we have an immigration strategy that can speed up processing times and proactively attract newcomers so that we're not retroactively trying to fill job positions. We want to proactively attract them so that we don't have these labor shortages. But that being said, a big piece of labor shortages as well ties back to business and the fact that our small business owners right now are really struggling to make ends meet. A lot of them are having to cut employee hours, lay off their staff just to make bill payments at the end of the month. And we are also seeing right now our young male unemployment is at its highest rate in Albertan history. So another piece of filling labor shortages is being able to make sure that our small business owners aren't overworked because they can't afford to keep the doors open. So that's why we also have quite a comprehensive plan to tackle small business costs, labor regulations, and try to get our young workers back into the workforce so we can help ease the burden on our small business owners.
On the question of labor shortages, Cam.
When our government first took office in 2015, one of the concerns I heard from the business community in Banff particularly was the long processing times for the Alberta Immigrant Nominee Program. So we worked with the Department of Labor, the Ministry of Labor, to shorten those wait times. What was happening is people were nearing the end of their visas and their application was still being processed, and they were kind of in limbo, not sure if they were going to get approved or have to go back home. So speeding that up was essential to, workers are part of the family here. Employers treat them like family, and they want them to stay when they've got good workers. Other ways we've tried to assist with the labor shortage is by creating what's called a dual credit program with the high schools in the area. So they work with Olds College, and students can get credits towards a post-secondary degree. And the Canadian Rockies Public School is looking at setting up a hospitality industry or institute here in the Bow Valley. So that's a way to work with students and get them interested in working in the hospitality industry. If we have the local talent here in the Bow Valley and we can introduce children to the hospitality industry, foster that and show them a career path forward, that's a great way to maintain and improve our labor force here in the Bow Valley. We also brought back the STEP program. So that's a summer temporary employment program that gives a wage subsidy to employers to help create jobs for students. And that's a way to get them into the industry and interested in moving up the ladder as well.
And to wrap up our structured questions on the subject of labor shortages, Dave.
Okay, this is my big idea. I want everybody in every riding to get together, figure out who the best man or woman for the job is, and then everybody folds. And I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, but throw your votes to the best person because we might get a government that way. Because, I don't know what I'll do if I don't win the election. Because I'm if I don't win the election, I don't see much hope in the future for Alberta. But if I'm in place and if I can raise enough money, I'm going to drop a flyer in Jason Kenning's riding. But his riding is conveniently half as big as everybody else, I found out. We're trying to get a candidate so he has half as many doors to knock on to win or whatever. But if I raise about $5,000, I need money for my insurance that's coming up in 3 days. I only need like $200. But of course, nobody will give me a wooden nickel. But I'm the guy that empties my pockets. One time I was in mess and I had a guy ask me for money. I emptied my pockets, but I forgot I was homeless myself. But anyway, I've got I've got connections in Alberta, and I grew up in Alberta. I sold my best business was selling little spruce trees all over Alberta. Like I know Tabor's too far to go, and I know Fort McLeod and Tabor, Nanton, and let's get down you know what I mean, Rocky Mountain House, all over Alberta. I know Calgary like the back of my hand because I delivered firewood there. I know it better than any cop. But the way they're building these communities is they're not building communities, they're building customer bases for the corporations, because when I grew up, we had a school, we had a skating rink, we had a scout hall, we had a Mac store, we had a cinema. My dad built this big, huge barn house and right on Marta Loop.
All right, thank you, Dave Phillips.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we have reached the end of our structured questions portion of the evening. That means we are going on to questions from the floor. If anyone has a specific question, there's a couple ways you can ask them. First of all, you can line up in front of one of the two microphones on either side of the aisle. You can also, if you'd like to do a written question, there's some notepads at the back if you need to grab, and some pens. You can write those down and then raise that piece of paper high in the air. Corey will go around and collect those when she sees those. Once again, I would ask that you direct your questions through me. You can direct them so up to 2 candidates can answer. You can pick the specific ones, or I may choose for you if, to just make sure to give everyone equal time up here. I would also like to remind everyone to avoid personal attacks against the candidates, to try to ask a question rather than make a statement. And for the candidates, out of the respect to people here in the room, please answer the question that was asked of you. All right, we're going to start on that side of the room there. Yes, ask your question.
Okay, good evening. My question, well, it's a bit of a statement and then a question.
Well, try to make it more of a question than a statement, if possible.
Change is constant. The Earth is not static. Climate change has been happening throughout geologic time. The Earth warms, then it cools.
All right, so what's your question?
Glaciers recede and advance. It's a natural process.
I'm going to have to ask you to leave the microphone unless you can ask a question.
Right. The question is the carbon tax simply an excuse for a massive tax grab, rather than a Chicken Little scenario that the sky is falling?
And is there any particular person you'd like to direct that to?
Of course, the NDP, Cameron Westhead.
Okay, Cam?
Thank you very much for the question. As I alluded to earlier in the debate tonight, climate change is one of the greatest threats that's facing our planet, and we have to take that seriously. So putting a price on pollution is a way that economists have agreed is the most economically friendly and most transparent way of sending a signal that pollution comes at a cost. And so what we do with the revenue from the price on pollution is we're investing in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So some of the ways we do that is through investments in public transit, future expansions to roam public transit that help take cars off the road, help people get around, and also reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Those funds are invested in public transit. We also have a goal of reaching 30% renewable energy by the year 2030. Alberta is the hottest investment market for renewables in North America because of our investment program. And we're also phasing out coal pollution, and that's actually happening sooner because coal's not economic anymore. People are switching to natural gas just because it makes a lot more sense. And so we can't afford to kick the can down the road any longer. Climate change, we're seeing the effects of that now. It's affecting our tourism industry. When visitors come here from around the world and the valley is covered in smoke, they go home and tell their friends, I went to Banff and I couldn't see the mountains. And so we need to take that threat seriously, and we need to take action, and that's exactly what we're doing.
All right, and because we can direct these to have 2 people answer these questions, I'd like to ask Anita for her opinion on that, the carbon tax.
I disagree. I truly believe that the carbon tax does not include the environment. When you talk about the polar bears up in Nunavut area, and you talk to the true elders, the true caretakers of the community, they will tell you Coca-Cola Company had no right to go up and prevent their natural habitats because the environment was changing. It was breathing and it was moving. So I think when we look at this carbon tax, you're right. Chicken Little, sky is falling, but at the same time, There's a cycle that goes through. And if we look at the cycles and the pattern components of those cycles and work together with them, we can breathe with the environment and we can move with the environment.
All right, so let's go to the other microphone here.
Okay, this is to do with schools. It's about gay-straight alliances. And there have been a number of statements recently, by Jason Kenney that make me very concerned about the future of gay-straight alliances, that the kids could be outed if they join. And I want to, that they play a very important role in protecting the kids. They feel included. It's a collaboration between the gays and the straights. And so I want to know your impression, like I want it directed to Miranda and also to Cameron. And what both of your personal impressions and where do you see this going from here? Okay.
Miranda to start.
Well, I promise you, I know there's been a lot of confusion over this issue, but I promise you the United Conservatives unequivocally do not stand by the mandatory outing of children who join GSAs. There's been a lot of misinformation spread around by numerous parties, but we love our kids. The primary thing that we care about is protecting our kids and raising them up and building society that can enable them to live great lives when they get older. So I promise you the United Conservatives will never support outing children who join GSAs. The only thing we've ever said is that if a teacher or a guardian, or not a guardian, so we'll say a counselor or a guidance counselor at the school deemed that that child who had joined the GSA potentially was suicidal, or maybe they were getting bullied really hard at school, and that teacher deemed that the parent ought to know that their child might genuinely be at risk, that is when a parent might be involved. Because we do believe that parents do love their children. They have their kids' best interests at heart. No, we absolutely do not support the mandatory outing of children who join these GSAs. But we do believe that if a teacher or a counselor deems that this child is in genuine risk of harm's way, that at that point perhaps the parents do deserve to be kept in the loop with their kids' lives, because we do believe that parents are the primary educators of their children and parents do love their children. And I think we need to give parents more credit, frankly.
Cam.
Thank you, Scott. I think you're right to be concerned about what Jason Kenney and the UCP are planning to do with GSAs. The fact that they would include undoing protections to GSAs in their election platform just is a good indicator at how backwards their agenda is. We know that in the UCP, they welcome extremists and that racism, homophobia, Islamophobia, it's a bozo eruption a day for that party. And we can tell that these people are not fit to lead the government. Our party...
Okay, let's let the candidate finish the question, please.
Our government created Bill 24 that strengthened and removed loopholes in gay-straight alliances that kids wouldn't actually want to form GSAs because they were worried that they'd get outed if a teacher could potentially even out them. And so we closed that loophole. And guess what? The UCP voted against that in the legislature. It was shocking. I think that CRPS, the Canadian Rockies Public School, has been a leader on the GSAs, and I would want to commend them for doing that. They took this action and supported GSAs before there was even a law. And so I think hats off to Canmore, Canadian Rockies Public School for taking that action. And they're people who we look to show us the way and make sure that we're supporting all kids in schools.
Thank you, and just a reminder, please no outbursts from the floor in the future here. Let's move to the other microphone there.
Sure, thank you. Something a bit different. I'm speaking for the Palliative Care Society of the Bow Valley. Alberta Health Services currently has no procedures in place to support residential hospice beds for end-of-life care in rural communities like ours. This means that Bow Valley residents regularly have to be transferred to Calgary or admitted to hospital when their care cannot be managed at home. I'd like to know what the candidates would propose to do to change this inequitable situation.
Okay. Just Brenda.
Thank you. So obviously palliative care goes beyond seniors, but certainly our party came out, I can't remember what day it was, with our seniors care net package, which includes aging in place and aging in our home communities. So while we haven't actually talked about palliative care in rural areas, absolutely, it will be part of the agenda, there's no question, because we have also committed to creating a seniors ministry as well. And as I said, I know palliative care goes beyond seniors, but I think it's incredibly important that we have palliative care, especially in rural areas, coming from a rural area myself. So that's something that absolutely I will champion.
Thank you, Brenda. Let's throw the question to Dave.
Hello. Yeah, my mom's 78, but she's lent me enough money to buy a small island, and I'm running out of money. I just don't have the heart to ask her, but anyway, I might need another couple $100 bucks. But the point is that, can you hear me? Hello? Yeah, anyway, sorry, people. Yeah, I was just talking about my mom, but she's actually, I think we can learn a lot from other cultures, like as far as taking care of our elders, and like they keep them in their house and take care of them, and works, and even as for raising small children with grandparents and stuff. But anyway, my mom was we lived in the big house, and then someone got a hold of her, and we sold it like within an hour, it's worth like $4 million. But if I get elected, I'm going to buy it back, and I'm going to give it to the alcoholic recovery people. But anyway, the point is that she was living in Calgary in a senior center, and then like a building, and then she moved to Innisfail, but she's going to be moving into a place. But this place is like, they give her like 3 or 4 choices of food a day, activities, and all this other stuff. And if some of these organizations, if I get a hold of, the funniest thing I said, I was telling a guy all my ideas. I said, I'm going to get the lottery fund, and then I'm going to spend it. Okay, because we made like $14 billion on VLTs, but we could have a 50-50 draw, 50 to the government, 50 to the people. I got lots of ways, I see business, but I guess what I'm saying is I was fortunate when I grew up. My mom stayed home, and I had my grandfather.
Okay, thank
was
you, Dave.
a pillar of my life. Thank you.
Can I come back for one moment? Palliative care and elderly care are different. Can I have the question answered by another candidate who addresses palliative care?
You can come up to the microphone again when we've gotten through a few more questions.
Can I jump in on the palliative one? Super quick.
Okay, sure.
I'll take less than 30 seconds. I just want to say that there has been a lot of talk about palliative care in the last while, and I do want to reassure you that the United Conservatives have been listening. I mean, our older generations helped build the world that we know today, and they deserve the best care and comfort as possible we can give them. So I do want to reassure you that we are committed to expanding and continuing the shift from hospital care to home care, and we are also committed to putting mandatory training into our health professionals in palliative care education, training, and standards for all the professionals in our health system on this topic.
All right.
Question for Miranda and for Cameron. As the world sort of moves into its sort of sunset years, sunset decades of the oil and gas industry, because it is coming, I just would like to hear from both candidates as to what your party would do to diversify the economy, and in particular diversify the economy into more renewable type energy, more renewable type things away from a carbon intensive type world. So maybe Miranda, you could answer that first.
Sure, I can start. I will clarify the oil demand is not set to peak until 2040s, so I will start with that. But this being said, the need to diversify is clear. I mean, we are continually on a boom and bust cycle in Alberta, and we do need some sort of stable way to make our economy, or get off this roller coaster. So one of the major things we are committed to is a giant tax cut on our job creators. We want to make sure that doing business in Alberta is easy and that people have an incentive to invest here, an incentive to do business here, and an incentive to hire people here. So we are committed to lowering the business tax rate to 8%, which will make us the lowest in Canada and the 6th lowest in all of North America as a way to attract business. But this being said, we are, in terms of green technology, what we are also committed to doing is emitters who emit over 100,000 tons of CO2 per year. We are going to set them a mandate to decrease their emissions by 10% over the next decade. And one of the ways that they can do that will be by paying into a fund at $20 per ton. And the money from this fund will be used to fund green technologies, cleaner mining tools, carbon capture technology, and different things like this.
And Cam.
Well, I agree. I think that renewable energy is the investment of the future, and we're seeing Alberta looked at as the hottest investment market in North America. I think, when we think about the alternatives and what Jason Kenney is planning to do by canceling the rebate, the energy efficiency programs, and all of the other efficiency programs that incentivize things like solar and wind, we can look at our municipalities and our homes as examples. So in Banff and Canmore, they have environmental goals to put solar panels on all of the municipal roofs. And so our government has provided a rebate program so that it's more affordable for municipalities to do that. The same goes for businesses and homeowners have the ability to save money by putting solar panels. It's up to $10,000 per household for residential. And we also have community generation incentives. So that's when small communities can get together and have a larger solar array that feeds their homes. And so Jason Kenney is planning on taking all those things away. We can look to Ontario and Doug Ford to see how he's chased investment away. Jason Kenney is saying he likes to finish Doug Ford sentences, and we don't want to see that come here. So we want to continue investing in renewable energy. We've had the lowest auctions for new renewable energy coming online at about 4 cents per kilowatt hour. And so this is a way to create jobs, it's creating investment, and it's creating the energy of the future.
All right, we will get back to the microphone in just a moment, but we do have some pre-submitted questions, and I'd like to ask one of these. These came through the Banff Lake Louise Hospitality Association and the Rocky Mountain Outlook. This one is going to be for Anita and for Brenda. So let's do a random draw here. This one is on the question of mental health and addictions. There's an increasing number of Albertans that are struggling with mental health and addictions. What have you come to understand about the challenges we face in these areas in the Banff-Kananaskis constituency? And what commitments are you prepared to make to address these challenges if elected? Anita.
Working in the addictions field for many years, I realized that there's a cycle, this age stages of change component. I also look at the mental health component. When the oil and gas started to go down, we started to see a lot more clients in the addiction treatment center. And you can deal with the surface Band-Aid approach, but the root cause of it is they don't have work, they can't pay their bills for their family, and the structures within the society right now are not working for them, and they can't find their own way out. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. We can throw money into the situation. We can say we're going to put in 8% on business, these pieces there, but the reality is those individuals need the support they need to get out of their own mental health. Residential school caused a big issue. And when they finished residential school, there was no mental health on the reserve. There was no health services. My dad used to say, our mental health was Johnny Walker and Hank Williams, because that was all we had.
Brenda.
Thanks. Certainly mental health is a huge issue, and it's even more so in the Bow Valley. Research shows that our hospitality industry actually tends to attract people with mental health issues. Go figure. So we absolutely will be putting more money into addiction services, into fixing or working on the opioid crisis. Another piece that certainly I've been talking to the party about for policy is really doing research on how much we would save on addiction costs, on homelessness, if we start looking at mental health as just your regular health checkup at a much earlier age. So we start making it accessible from childhood on. And then that way, hopefully, we would save far more money on the other end in homelessness and addiction.
Okay, back to the microphone.
I'm not tall enough. Okay, sorry. There we go. Sorry about that. My name is Carla. I'm a volunteer with the Palliative Care Society of the Bow Valley, which was actually established in 2014 by a group of very committed volunteers. And they were encouraged by Alberta Health Services at one point to submit a paper on the need for palliative care, hospice, respite care in the Bow Valley. Then the society heard that there were sufficient hospice beds in the Calgary zone of which we are a part. Most of the hospice beds are available in Calgary and surrounding areas. So my question to Mr. Westhead is, you're given the responsibility of answering this question as well. If your Alberta NDP government is re-elected in the Bow Valley, will there be a concerted effort to consult with the Palliative Care Society of the Bow Valley, determine the number of hospice beds that are required in the Bow Valley so that people who live in the Bow Valley do not have to die in a place not at home? Thank you.
That's a great question, Carla, and I want to thank you for the work that you do with the Society, Dr. Tweeddale and the board and all of the volunteers who work at the with the Palliative Care Society. I've had the honor of meeting with Dr. Tweeddale and Marley, the Executive Director, on a number of occasions and attending their open houses to learn more about the project that you're undertaking. And I think it's absolutely discouraging to have heard about the setback with AHS. I know how much work went into that proposal, and I know that it was unfortunate that it's come to that. But one thing that is always encouraging is to see the talent level of the volunteers in the Bow Valley. We're so lucky to have people who are retired CEOs or senior leaders who put those skills to work helping advance these kind of projects. And so what I've done is, working with Dr. Tweeddale and the Palliative Care Society, is to sit down with them when I was the MLA and try to, when someone puts a roadblock in my way, I use that as a stepping stone, and we need to make sure we're looking for solutions. We don't take no for an answer because this is such an important initiative. And so I want to continue the work that I've started with the society. We're trying to set them up with instead of talking to Alberta Health Services, is to get them in touch directly with the Ministry of Health, who sets those kind of policies, and put pressure on them to make sure that rural communities get that kind of care that people deserve.
So we've had all candidates, except for Anita, answer a question on palliative care related subjects. So I'd like to invite Anita to answer that question as well.
Thank you. Okay. Palliative care, we have a huge amount of nurses and LPNs working in those fields that may or may not speak English and understand the social structure of most of our philanthropists or elders that have created Alberta what it is today. And the hardest thing is to be able to deal with where you are with your physical health and try to explain to someone who's not speaking English what you need for care. When we look at that, that adds more stress to the person that's being taken care of, and it adds more stress to our LPNs and our RNs, and there is no communication or relationship building in that one, and that's important. I can tell you that as RNs, who speak the English language, we need to include the Indigenous populations within that one to be able to help with communication pieces. We need to include members that are RNs in those communities to be able to look at the relationships so that they can start having those conversations and making them feel comfortable, especially at the hospice level, and include their social practices of the family that they have as they move on to the next world.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Right. Hi. Is this thing on? Okay. So my question is going to be a little more of a philosophical one, specifically regarding two-tier healthcare. So one of the arguments for two-tier healthcare is that you would make one system faster by allowing people who want to buy out of the system and just pay up front, get their treatment, go through private insurers. It would allow them to get out of that system and jump the queue. Now there's definitely debate as to whether that effectively happens in a two-tier system, but the question more so is what entitles someone who makes, ethically, what entitles someone who makes more money to better health treatment or faster health treatment than someone who cannot afford to pay?
Do you have any particular candidate you'd like to direct that question to?
I'll leave it open to the forum.
Okay, yeah, we'll start with Dave.
Yeah, that's a good thing you're talking about. Like when I grew up, like I was born in '68, but like when I grew up, like we had like health care was almost just like a given. It was free, and then at one point we were charging for it, and I was like a certain age, like 30 or something or 27, but actually I had only $100 in my bank, which is more than I got now. But the Alberta Health Services actually took my last $100. But anyway, like, and when I grew up, like we had like the Canadian Armed Forces was a peacekeeping detachment, like, and that comforted me. And my grandfather was an engineer, so he didn't have to go to the war, so I kind of led a sheltered life. But one thing that we need to have, and Jason Kenney wants like private health care, and like I was thinking, like all these people are great people. Like it's too bad we couldn't, have everybody in the government because. But like Jason Kenney, like I'll just let me finish with this one last thing. Is I'm in it because Trudeau wants to give our country to the United Nations. It's Agenda 21. If you don't look it up, because you probably do yourself a favor if you don't know what the hell's going on. But the point is that if anybody's involved with the UN, it's probably Jason Kenney because he was the immigration minister. So we're all scared shitless of him, and he doesn't really know. Like the NDP and UCP. They don't really seem to have any ideas, but the Alberta Party has great ideas. The Green Party has great ideas. That's why I want everybody to get together, figure out who the best man for the job is or woman, and then everybody folds and like they got like 2 choices on the ballot or something. But
all right, thank you,
anyway,
Dave Phillips.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to remind everyone to watch your language on stage. Miranda, do you want to field this one?
Yeah, I do think this one was largely probably aimed at me regardless, so I will talk on this. Obviously, I did make some statements about two-tier healthcare, and I do believe that that's why we're having this conversation tonight. And I will clarify my statements that were made in the nomination. There is no elite population. Everyone deserves healthcare. Whether you have $100 in the bank account, or whether you have $100,000 in the bank account. I mean, I know people who paid a couple $100 to get an MRI, and there's people who've gone on debt to finance a surgery that they can't afford to wait for in the system. So there is no elite class. I think we just need to look at options that, can help suffering Albertans. But this being said, I did make those comments in the nomination, and I do want to clarify that they were in no way reflective of the United Conservatives. A statement was made here that Jason Kenney wants to privatize healthcare, and I will be very unequivocally clear that this is not the case. We've heard this from Cam Westhead, we've heard it from my other opponents. We've seen many attacks, and I want to be very clear that United Conservatives have committed to a universally accessible, publicly funded healthcare system. We've committed to not cutting $1 from our system, and we've actually committed to possibly increasing funding in areas like mental health, where we've committed an increase of $10 million. So I just want to be very clear on this, that the statements that I made were not reflective of Jason Kenney, they were not reflective of the party, and no matter what, we will continue publicly funded, universally accessible healthcare for all Albertans.
We'll get back to the microphone in a sec. I'm going to draw from the hat here. Let's do Brenda and Cam for this next one. Subject is, ironically enough, healthcare. What actions can you personally commit to on behalf of the citizens of the Banff Kananaskis constituency to strengthen the publicly funded healthcare system in Alberta? Brenda.
My goodness, apparently a magic wand. I mean, really I think, strengthen the healthcare system, we have to figure out how it's operating right now. Overall, I look at supply management, I look at operations. How is it running now? Once we figure that out, then you can figure out how it can work better in the Bow Valley. I actually think that we're very lucky here in the Bow Valley. I think we have a great PCN network here, far better than any other rural community I've seen. So quite honestly, I think we're blessed here in the Bow Valley.
Thanks, Rob. That's a great question. With my background as a registered nurse, I worked in the operating room at the Foothills Hospital for about 10 years before being elected. And so healthcare is definitely something that is a real passion of mine. I think that underlying everything is that Canadians, one of the things we value most is our universal public healthcare system. And that's based on need and not your ability to pay. And one of the things I've heard a lot about is long wait times. And that's not right. I think we need to shorten wait times. And so one of our election commitments is to add $90 million to look at shortening wait times and add additional operating room space so that patients can get the care that they need. Something else that's really, really important to Southern Alberta in general is the Calgary Cancer Centre. Previous governments had promised this over and over and over again. When I worked at the Foothills Hospital, I knew that cancer patients were getting treatment in repurposed storage closets. And that's not right. People deserve better than that, and people deserve to have treatment and dignity. So Rachel Notley didn't just promise to build the Calgary Cancer Centre, she's getting it built. And I think the other component of that is staffing. When that building is operational, it's going to require a lot of staff. So freezing the healthcare budget like the UCP wants to do is not going to result in having that building staffed the way it should be. So we're committed to not just building the cancer center, but staffing it appropriately so people get the care that they deserve.
Thank you. Let's move back to the microphone on the far one there.
Okay, I'll say this at the outset. Also for Cameron and Brenda, please, if you could answer this question. In the hospitality industry, restaurant industry as well, it's been a really tough 4 years. We've gone through a perfect storm of a recession, as well as a bunch of legislative policy increases that have increased our cost of business while our revenues were down, which has resulted in a lot of unemployment. In fact, we have 10,200 fewer people in the hospitality industry working now than we did in 2014. And I looked at all the platforms, and the reason why I didn't ask Miranda this is I think the United Conservative platform spells out in detail a job creation plan. The Alberta Party says something about that. But when I read the NDP platform, it says very little about what you're going to do to help these bleeding small businesses, help, once again, get these struggling businesses back on track, and increase the employment rate in the province, which has been shrinking. So I would link both of those candidates to please elaborate what their platforms will do to help employment and the hospitality industry in particular.
Go ahead, Cam.
Thank you. That's a great question because, like I said, tourism is an essential part of diversifying our economy. It showcases Alberta to the world, and it drives visitors here. And so the work that you do is incredibly important, and supporting that is important too. We have created 2 tax credits for small businesses to diversify our economy and add new products too, and product development and product innovation for tourism. So there are 2 tax credit programs. The investment tax credit, whereas if you have an idea for a new tourism business, you can apply to, when investors decide to invest in your idea, they get a certain amount of their investment back as a tax credit. There's also a capital investor tax credit. So that's as you open a new business and it's a capital intensive, you need to buy equipment. There's a credit that you get back on that too. We also lowered the small business tax by 30% to help employers deal with the economy as it was. And I think it's still, it begs to be repeated, is that the social services that underpin businesses like public transit, you don't need, now with Rome Public Transit, you don't need to own a car anymore. And so it's so much easier for businesses to attract and retain employees when we make the Bow Valley more affordable place to live. I've also spoken to employers out in Deadman's Flats, for example, and they have a real hard time keeping employees because they're kind of stuck in Deadman's. And so if we can expand transit to other communities like we have to Lake Louise, it makes it so much better for employees and employers.
All right, thank you, Cam.
Thanks, Mark. So we, of course, have said we won't touch the minimum wage. It will stay at the $15. But what we are doing is allowing small business a much higher base deduction off of your taxes. So instead of changing the small business tax amount, you actually were changing the deductible. So that's 2 big ones. We, of course, have also said that we are taking the carbon tax off of small business. We know that obviously restaurant business, kitchens and whatnot, that is an added cost, not to mention the fuel getting our food out here to the Bow Valley. All of those surcharges are what added up. There's no question. I know, certainly I've been hearing from the restaurants that one of the biggest changes to the employment standards was taking away that regular day of work, when it came to a stat holiday. And I won't, if you're not used to doing payroll, I won't bore you with how that used to be calculated. But I do know that that has been hugely detrimental to a whole lot of small businesses when that disappeared. So those are some of the things absolutely we'll be looking at. And we also talked about when Stephen Mandel spoke to Restaurants Canada in Edmonton, we understand the extra costs to hospitality as that's typically people's first jobs. So we want to look at the post-secondary schools to do some of the training so people are coming to you already trained.
Thank you. Go ahead, Peter.
Thanks very much, and thank you all of the candidates. I have a question really for two of the candidates who are part of pretty established parties, so forgive me for only addressing Ms. Stanton and Ms. Rosin with this. It's about the carbon tax. So I'm a small business owner. I've started a few businesses here, and contrary to the gentleman there, businesses are thriving here. That's why our tax rate is actually going up so much. The assessment's gone up 10%. So we're doing pretty well. And in the long run, I want to listen to what the world scientists say. I also want to listen to what the top economist said. So this economist who 5 months ago got the Nobel Prize for recommending the carbon tax is somebody I listen to.
Peter, what's your question?
So my question to each of you is, I know you're constrained by your party's opposition to the carbon tax, but personally, if you were on caucus, would you have enough courage to speak up for the importance of a carbon tax?
Miranda, do you want to start?
I will say that I will say that I have the courage to stand up to my party, and I think we have seen that on multiple other issues in this riding. When it comes to a carbon tax, I will not stand up to my party because I agree with my party that a tax on people who live in rural communities for driving to work in the morning, that a tax on people for buying their groceries or for heating their homes when it's minus 40 in the winter and they don't want to freeze to death is not the right way to combat climate change. In fact, when Rachel Notley was asked how much has the carbon tax reduced emissions, she didn't have an answer. And that's because we can't prove that it does, because we're all still living the lives that we know so well. So that's why, rather than taxing us for living our lives, the United Conservatives are committed to working with the heavy emitters, those who actually contribute 60% of Alberta's emissions, those who emit over 100,000 tons of CO2 per year, and working with them to make an actual tangible difference in our emissions, rather than taxing everyday Albertans just for simply living their lives and trying to scrape by.
Thank you, Peter. It won't just be me. I'm not going to lie. When that policy came down, we all kind of went, well, that's not what we talked about necessarily. And one thing about the Alberta Party is we very much want to make sure that we are at a level with the carbon tax that we won't then have to have the Liberals' carbon tax hit us. So we want to make sure that we do that right. But we did, of course, still talk about making sure that it doesn't affect small business. I'm trying to think of the whole outline, but yes, there's actually more than me. And one of the things that we've always talked about at the Alberta Party is we will absolutely review policy. If it doesn't work, we change it.
Thank you.
It's based on evidence.
I'm going to do another submitted question. Let's go to Dave and Anita for this one. This one's on the question of fiscal responsibility. Alberta's per capita spending on programs is almost the highest in the country. What's your party's plan to manage escalating costs, and how will the constituents of Banff Kananaskis know you're following through on that plan if you're elected as MLA? Dave, go ahead.
I understand the question, but like I'm listening to the Alberta Party, and like I kind of like the Alberta Party, but one time I was in an election and their policy then was zero tax for small business. So then I got up behind him and I said, that's the way I've been running my business for 20 years, is zero tax for the government. It was all cash. And then we did another event and I got up and said the same thing behind him, but I might even pull the pin on this idea, but I'm getting pretty tired. Like, I do need people to help. I got a coffee can out front, like even if you could give me like $5, because I literally only got about $2 if I'm lucky. But the thing is, I've like put my heart and soul into it, and I've spent thousands, but I do need some help. And I'm confused because, like, I'd like to see a new government in place, like even if I can get Jason Kenney off the deal, because I can't know, the government ain't gonna run properly with the guy that has an agenda. He's got an agenda, he's been bought and paid for, he's worth $12 million. He's never had a business, and we say he can't run an ice cream stand. Like Jason Kenney, like I was saying about the royalties, he wants oil companies to sign on with no royalties forever. The royalties will never go up with Jason Kenney. And the problem is we have no royalties on the oil. And when we're giving our natural resources away, like the logs that I'm from Sundre, but the loads of, like a semi-load of logs, we're charging 25 cents a meter, which is only 20 bucks a load. And with the oil, we're making 12 bucks a barrel, so we're literally giving and the only way I see that the government's making any money is on taxes on people.
All right, thank you, Dave. Anita.
We will audit healthcare and education management. Less than 30% of the spending currently makes it to the frontline workers. We will investigate the other 70% and find savings within impacting frontline health and education workers.
All right, go ahead, John.
Good evening. I envy you people that you're sitting up there. I would love to sit there. If I would be 23 years old, I'd be there. I know I speak just as much as Dave, so I do add my closing sentence to the front, just in case I don't have time for it. I urge you people, when you leave this room, and you should get elected, any one of you, don't forget where you come from.
All right, what's your question, John?
Represent your riding, please. I just like to ask about the affordable housing. Number one, why isn't the provincial government, through the Municipal Act, make the staff housing more forceful? It's easy for the provincial government to send out the responsibility to the municipalities, but they get the hold of that. That is one of the main sources why we have this affordable housing problem.
All right, thanks, John. Let's direct that one to Cam and Anita.
Well, we've talked a little bit about affordable housing earlier this evening. So to add to what I had spoken about earlier, I know that employers in the Bow Valley often go above and beyond the call of duty with respect to providing affordable housing to their workers. It's an additional cost on those employers, and they do that because they know it's part of the cost of doing business. And so providing access to safe, affordable housing is something that I know the employers here take very seriously. The way we've supported municipalities with affordable housing is also through making sure that they have sustainable and predictable transfers from the province. There's a program called the Municipal Sustainability Initiative, and that was a series of funding arrangements over a number of years. And while the economy was in a bit of a downturn and we were in difficult financial circumstances, the UCP party was calling on us to cut funding to these kind of programs. And really what that would have the effect of is just downloading the cost to municipalities. Then they would raise your property taxes, and that's not right. So what we did is we kept our promise to municipalities so that they would have that stable funding. Some of the things that they've used to pay for that is like the Fenlands Recreation Center, Elevation Place, and it goes to helping with their debt. And so that's a way that we can support municipalities to build that affordable housing and create inclusive communities.
I think I'm the first homeowner in my family. And I can tell you, taking all the courses and buying your own mortgage, one of the things I forgot to include was the taxes. So when I look at the situation here, you're looking at affordable housing, but you're also looking at people that understand the concept of those. You're also looking at environmental scan components to see what's available there. If dollars align to go directly to that space, and they're going directly to that place, if they set that up in 2014 and your dollars come in 2019, there's a huge cost exchange that has not been accumulated in that. And that's what happened with low affordable housing on the reserve when the floods came through. They did not even take that in consideration. So you're here, money comes in, all of a sudden you have a whole list of people that need homes, and there was no cushion in regards to the increase in prices for labor, for equipment, for what you needed for those. And those also need to be in place when we look at that.
So we did ask for people who wanted to write in a question rather than go to the microphone to submit those. And I've got one here for both Miranda and Cam. So I'll start with you, Miranda. What makes a good MLA, and what qualities do you have to be a good representative for Banff Kananaskis?
I think the most important thing to being an MLA is being someone who can listen to the people and honestly stand up for them and not just toe the party line at every cost. Over the course of my 13-month campaign, I've knocked on the doors of about 30,000 people 2 times over. I've held community events across the riding. I've worked with, prior to entering this, I helped to co-found events under Cyan to encourage engagement from young adults and other community members in the electoral process. But I do think that what constituents really deserve is a representative who's going to represent their needs in Edmonton and not the other way around. And that's why when it comes to issues that have affected our riding, I have taken a very vocal stance. When I've done these things, I have actually been called a liar. I've been called quite a host of nasty names by some of my opponents and other people for doing so. But the reality is that I'm not a liar. I think I'm not a vote panderer, and I think that standing up for your constituents in Edmonton is one of the most important things an MLA can do. And frankly, I think that that's what you elect us to do, is to represent you and not the other way around. So I firmly believe that the most important thing an MLA can do is represent you, represent your voices, the things you're asking them to do, and really make life better for you.
Thank you very much. That's a great question. And over the last 4 years as the MLA, the things that I tried to focus on the most were listening, being accessible to people, being approachable and having people feel comfortable coming forward to me, acting as their advocate, and being a partner. I know the feedback that I received is in the first 6 months or so of my job, people would invite me to meetings and share their ideas with me. And the feedback that I've received since then is people thought, wow, this guy's just sitting there quietly and listening to us, but he's not saying a lot. And that was intentional. My job in this role is to listen to you, hear what your ideas are, because you're the experts. You people live in this community, you care about it, and you know what's best for the community. So my job was first of all to listen, and then we work together as partners. I think another important element is showing up at events. This community in the Bow Valley has so many amazing events, cultural opportunities, and people like to invite their MLA so we can be part of that and share in that experience with them. So I've gone to as many events as I possibly can, and it's a way of showing, it's easy to sit at home, but what's really important, what really matters, is showing up and taking the time to say to the community, I care about your culture, I care about being here, and I want to participate and have fun along with you and show that commitment.
So we have time for one more question from the floor before closing statements. Go ahead.
Hi, Rob. I'm a big fan. I listen to Mountain FM every day.
Oh, thank you.
I started working in the Bow Valley when I was 14 years old, and I've worked here, except for university, pretty much ever since. And I think that young people are, I think that young people are hugely important to our workforce in the Bow Valley, and that we work just as hard as everyone else. And I would like to give Miranda Rosin an opportunity to address the UCP's proposal to pay young people less. First of all, what exactly do you mean by young people? And secondly, how do you see that applying in the Bow Valley, where 14, 15, 16-year-olds are working just as hard as everybody else? Thank you.
I can absolutely address this, and nobody's ever saying that young people don't work just as hard as everybody else. But what we are saying is that we do, I think us as conservatives believe in the merit of work, and we do believe that somebody with a university education perhaps does deserve a higher wage than someone who is 14. So I will say that our youth wage is only $2 lower than the minimum wage, so it's only $13, and it is for those only under 17. So it would be only for high school students who basically still live at home. It's not meant to be a wage for people who are paying the bills Or, oh, I think she has more to say.
I'm sorry, high school students who live at home are the ones that are doing the same jobs as everybody else. I'm talking like
So yeah, let's
waitresses
just
and
let her
all that
answer the
stuff.
question. Thank you.
And I do understand that, but the students who live at home, they don't have bills to pay. And right now we are seeing young male unemployment at its highest rate in Albertan history, and I've said that a few times tonight. But that really is because employers literally cannot afford to hire multiple and staff multiple employees for shifts when the labor costs are so high. I was just talking to a business owner in the Bow Valley this week, and he said that out of every 4-week month, 2 weeks of his entire sales are dedicated just to payroll alone, and that doesn't even cover the costs of running his business. So our plan is not to devalue the young employees, but to make sure that we can continue having young employees in the workforce so that they can make a wage, make some money, get experience on their resume before heading out into the real world while not bankrupting the businesses at the same time.
Yeah, we'll give Dave an opportunity to answer that question, then we'll move on to closing statements.
It's a big concern because I heard that like 46% of the kids like 13 to 26 have no work, the male kids, and in the Bow Valley, you guys are actually very, very fortunate because like when I was a kid, I had like even 2 dishwashing jobs, paper routes. I was always fairly ambitious, but there's no opportunities, and it's like I've actually got a way to make money on the internet, maybe, but I'll put that on my website. But I've been working on an internet idea for years, but I honestly don't know. Because when I was a kid, like we could do like rototill people's gardens, we could like paint fences, or hedge trimming was a good one, or there was always things to do. But now like all those jobs are like gone. There's no like like even my firewood business is obsolete now because of the price of the wood. But we do have to stop fracking because it's going to ruin the water. Because I'm in the field and I see all the action, but they're piping it out of the river with the pipeline literally to wherever they're taking it, and the water's worth more than the oil. And the joke used to be, I'm an environmentalist, but I will clear cut given the opportunity. That was the joke, but I wouldn't clear cut anymore. But we can't even afford to clear cut. But they're actually using like 2,000 log truck loads a day. And when I went to the forest, I liked it so much I moved there, and I'm in the forest. But the fact is that like they're not replanting, and to me it seems like we don't even have enough trees left for our own houses, and that's a really important thing in this society. Because it's like, just one little thing. In the Dominican Republic had a dictator, but he said no more logging, and in Haiti they logged it, and then the Dominican Republic is a resort, and the Haiti's a hellhole, like Trump says. So
all right, thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
I would like to ask one final question, please.
Unfortunately, we don't have time. We need to move on to closing statements.
We'll make it a very quick question.
No,
sir.
we need to move it on to closing statements.
Come on, there's just one, just myself. It'll be quick. Okay, as soon as NDP, as soon as the NDP
Can we cut that microphone, please,
power,
Ed? Can we cut the microphone,
investment
please?
in oil and gas dried up, such as Encana diverting funds.
All right, I'd like to invite the candidates to move on to closing statements.
To the thousands of oil
excuse me,
and
sir,
gas
can you please sit down?
professionals that have been thrown out of
I'd now like to invite the candidates to move on to closing statements. We'll do these in alphabetical order, starting with Anita Crowshoe. You have 2 minutes.
Sorry, what was the question again?
Your closing statement, however you want to wrap this up.
My closing statement. I think my closing statement really is about you're looking for someone that's going to listen, but you're also looking for someone that's going to come back and say to you, I see the passion behind what you're saying, but it's not going to happen. Can we look at another way to do this? Not only talking to the people that you disagree with, but also making sure that you're representing those ones and that they continue to come back to your constituency office to have those conversations and to work through those pieces. I have always been considered someone that has stood out on their own to do things. And when I look at that, I also look at the concept of how I looked at the environment by going up to Lake Louise, by putting the tobacco down, by working for the Stampede, by confronting Tim Hortons and saying to Tim Hortons, that thing that happened in Lethbridge should have never happened. Give me a call, let me help you out. And what I'd like to do is offer opportunities. And one of the opportunities we were able to do was create Tim Hortons coming to our reserve and participating in the community, participating in the powwow, and strengthening the relationships in those areas. And that's what the important thing is. The late Marmee Hess spending time with one of the ranchers in this area who did phenomenal work, but also understanding both of her sat on different areas. Inuit work that she brought out from the Inuit communities, and she would say to me, there's a fight between the University of Calgary and the Calgary Stampede. They want this art that I've collected. And she said to me, well, I worked for the Stampede. What should I do with it? Well, give it back to the Inuit people. Even our disagreements, we still continued on the conversation. And that's what I'm willing to do for you as a candidate for this area. Use my voice and my language.
Thank you, Anita Crowshoe. Moving on to Dave Phillips.
I got 100 things to say, but anyway, on the way up here, I was listening to the radio, but the first thing Jason Kenney's going to do is shut the tap off for the oil to BC, and that's not being very neighborly. But anyway, how about we give them some cheap oil and get the gas price down in BC? But I got like practical solutions, but this newspaper that I was talking about, if we put advertising in the back, like cheap for sole proprietors and expensive for corporations, like I'd like to tax the shit out of some corporations, but the ones that I like, I won't tax. But like, the government has hundreds of corporations that are like separate from the government, and they've all got executive boards, and they're all being paid like $250,000 so we can shut down. Like even the government that we're sitting in, we all get, if you're a party, you get $80,000 per person for your office, but we don't need 86 secretaries. I can't get past the stupid secretaries to get to the MLAs, and the MLAs don't call me back. Like, you know what I mean? I'll probably take all the calls for Alberta on my flip phone, but like people don't seem to want to make the effort to even get back. Like if I request to talk to the MLA, the MLA doesn't call me, the secretary calls me. It's like nobody wants to actually. But I'm working hard, and I'll continue to work hard. And like I'm a tireless worker. When I get up, something happens, and the day starts, and I do some stuff. And if I'm in the government, I can do probably more in a couple of days than they can do in 3 years, because when I bring a motion to the table, I don't have to wait like 6 months. And I want it to, we might even, I'd like to see the Parliament of Edmonton turn into a courthouse, and we'll have an amnesty and let some of these people out of jail, because even one of my campaign guys, he was going to be a fundraiser, but they put him in jail for having bear spray, and they charged him with having a weapon and shit. I gave him $80 and told him to try to raise some money, but the thing is, I lost the $80, but I could sure use some money, and I've got a can at my table. Even if you can drop $5 in it, maybe I can get something to eat and continue tomorrow and get the day going. And buy myself a Tim Hortons. I bet you if I can't even buy a cup of coffee right now. So,
Thank you, Dave Phillips.
For money, but I need the money. Thanks.
Miranda Rosin.
Well, like I said in my opening, this election is about change. We have two very divergent paths in front of us, and you as voters have to choose which one you want to take. One of those paths includes increased deficits, higher debts, higher taxes, more regulations, a very bloated bureaucracy, and frankly, no private sector work. But the other alternative is an increased private sector, a balanced budget, prosperity, a fiscal house for everyone. The United Conservatives outlaid a very clear and lengthy plan to make sure we get Alberta back on track, make sure we get Albertans back to work, make sure we stop our small businesses from struggling so much, make sure we bring investment back to our provinces so that those in the big cities can get back to work. We know that this province is at a crossroads, and we need to make sure that we bring about the change that can keep Alberta thriving and get us back to where we used to be. So that's why, like I said, our plan is 118 pages long. It's the most comprehensive election platform ever released in Albertan history, because we don't want to have a simple plan to get Alberta back on track. We want to make sure that we cover all of our bases and do everything humanly possible to make sure that every Albertan has a future in this province. So on April 16th, I hope you will join me and join the United Conservatives in creating an Alberta that is strong and free.
Brenda Stanton.
Thanks, Rob. So I disagree. I don't think that you just have two choices at this table. Yes, there are two very different viewpoints, and that's exactly why I decided to run, because there are other options, and we absolutely have to have some folks in Edmonton that can make sure that government keeps working and that we don't just have bickering like what we've seen during this campaign. I've lived here my entire adult life. We know that we live in a bubble here. There is no question. We really have a hard time understanding what's happening outside of our bubble. We also have opportunity to make sure that Banff, Lake Louise, Canmore, Kananaskis, this whole riding takes its rightful place in Alberta's economy, because we never have. We have never stood up and said tourism matters. Tourism is a vital economic solution across this province, and we have never ever stood up and said that. This is the first time you have opportunity to elect someone who eats, lives, and breathes tourism, who absolutely understands the issues of this constituency, because I have lived it for the last 30 years. But more than that, I'm an Albertan. So I also understand how other Albertans think, which means I can contextualize things to help get our message across. So that's why I ask for you to support me, Brenda Stanton, on April 16th.
And we'll wrap up the evening with Cam Westhead.
I'm honored by the trust that you placed in me in 2015 to be your MLA, and I've worked hard every day to earn that trust. And I'm honored to have been endorsed by Banff Pride, an organization that promotes diversity in the Bow Valley. I'm honored to have been endorsed by Leslie Taylor, Banff's first mayor and an outstanding community advocate. So this election is about you. It's about millions of Albertans just like you. It's about your future, our future. And who is fit to be your premier? Who do you trust to be your premier and your MLA? The choice ahead is the starkest Albertans have faced in decades. Rachel Notley and I are focused on our future, fighting for pipelines, breaking away from the devastating cycles of boom and bust, and setting our province on a more diversified, modern, and resilient foundation. Together, we are tackling poverty, supporting education, making sure patients in our hospitals get the care that they need without having to show their credit card on the way in. In this election, you have an important choice to make. We must not allow two different Albertas to form, one for the wealthy and one for everyone else. Let us honor the traditions and wisdom of everyone who built this province and everyone who has loved this land. Let us too honor our financial and environmental and democratic obligations to our kids and our grandkids. With these priorities as our compass, we can raise one another up. I'm asking for your vote to make sure we're all able to see that same hopeful and optimistic horizon.
Can I just say one thing, please? I just have a minute for my time.
You know, it takes a lot to stand up for election. Can we give a hand to all of our candidates here this evening?
Yeah, I might forfeit my votes to Brenda.
So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us here this evening.